is an economic recession the same thing as a housing recession? Let's dive in and find out. Hi everyone, my name is Jade, co-founder of Legendary Real Estate Services, and we have heard a lot of talk about a recession. We've heard about it at least since the fourth quarter of 2022. But what exactly is an economic recession? What causes it? Are there variables or indicators that tell us when it's going to be, how long it's going to be, how bad it's going to be? What are the common recession characteristics? Let's first define a recession. So according to the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF, they, as a rule of thumb, define a recession as 2 consecutive quarters of a decline in the country's inflation-adjusted real gross domestic product. Say that 3 times fast. So GDP, it's basically the values of the goods and services that a country produces. The problem with this rule of thumb is that it's way too narrow. It only focuses on one indicator, and it's really not just about GDP. The National Bureau of Economic Research, they define a recession as a significant decline in a country's activity that spreads across the economy and it lasts for more than a few months. So this takes into account GDP, employment, income, sales, industrial production. So it looks at a wide variety of variables. What causes a recession? Well, the fact of the matter is there are many causes to a recession. No 2 recessions look exactly alike, and that is why it's so hard for economists to predict when there will be one, and often they don't actually know we're in one until it's already in full swing. Inflation. When a country is dealing with high inflation, the most common thing for the Federal Reserve to do is to tighten their monetary policy or hike interest rates. Sound familiar? That's what's happening right now. The problem is when it is used excessively, it severely increases the cost of borrowing and dampens the demand for goods and services, thereby slowing the economy. And this is what led to the recession in 1949, 1953, 1957, and the first of 2 recessions between 1980 and 82. And potentially now. Another cause of a recession is the sharp increase in the price of inputs that are used to produce goods and services. So for example, a sharp increase in oil prices, that can be a harbinger of a recession. It was actually the reason in 1973 with the OPEC oil embargo and in the second of the 2 recessions between 1980 and 1982. Another popular cause of a recession is the classic boom-bust cycle where we see problems with our financial markets. So we saw that in 2008 with the boom-bust cycle of the real estate market, and we saw it in 2001 with the dot-com boom and bust. Some of the indicators that economists use to monitor or predict recession is, well, credit volume, asset prices, unemployment rate, GDP, interest rates, or consumer confidence. As you can see, though, the behavior patterns associated with these numerous economic variables, they can either be the cause or the result of a recession, which is why, again, it's so difficult for economists to predict when there will be one, if we're actually in one, how long we're going to be in one, and what is going to be the severity or magnitude of a recession. And it's also going to vary region to region. While there are many causes to recession and just as many variables to measure a recession, there are typically some common characteristics. They typically last about a year, less if we're lucky. We usually see a drop or a decline in GDP of about 2% if it's mild, 5% if it's more severe. It usually lasts about 2 quarters. We do typically see a rise in employment. Because of a rise in unemployment, we see a fall in consumption or consumer spending. We also see inflation fall, again, because there's not as much demand, because the economy has slowed down, so inflation naturally falls. We unfortunately usually see an erosion in home prices and equity value. There's also usually turmoil of some kind in the financial markets as well. So what about a housing recession? Technically, a housing recession, like I said, is different from an economic recession. Well, if you look at real estate statistics dating back to the 1800s, real estate moves in 4 phases across an 18-year cycle. Those 4 phases are the recovery phase, the expansion, hypersupply, and then the recession phase. So typically, always, the recession follows hypersupply. Because in hypersupply, like we saw in 2008, we have way too much construction that happened. We have an overbuilt amount of residential units. We also had an enormous amount of homes become available via foreclosure because of the subprime mortgage. So what happens when supply goes up? prices come down. Hence, now we move into a recession phase of the real estate market cycle. Some typical characteristics that you see in housing recession is you see rental vacancies go up, and there are just an overabundance of available spaces to rent. So you see these owners trying to do these concessions to lure renters in so their home doesn't sit vacant. We also see new construction come to almost nearly a screeching halt. We also see home prices decline. There is an abundance of homes for sale. There are numerous sellers. So we are in a buyer's market where buyers can cherry pick and choose which home they want, and sellers have to make some pretty heavy concessions to lure those buyers in. Those are the characteristics of a housing recession. I don't know about you, but I am not seeing an overabundance of supply, and we're not going to see that anytime soon with the market inventory being as tight as it is and with less construction coming up on the market. Interest rates are making it very difficult for builders right now, hence a slow in building starts and building permits. Now that you know what a housing recession is and what an economic recession is and how they're different and how they are similar, you can start making some really informed decisions about where we are in the real estate market cycle and adjust your investment portfolio or your home buying decisions or your selling decisions based on that information. Also, in my monthly market update, I cover where we're at in terms of a recession. So check those out on a monthly basis. If you have any questions whatsoever, send me an email. There it is. I love getting questions. And until next time, thanks for stopping by.